Okay, and let's see. So, welcome our JDI Connect audience to today's webinar. If you think you're on a webinar on how to change the oil in your car, you're at the wrong webinar. Today we're going to be talking about RJJ 4.0. So hopefully that's the one you're dialing into, and we're going to get started here in just about 30 seconds. So welcome to today's webinar. So again, my name is Beth Oprish. I guess there's not an again. I didn't say that in the beginning. So my name is Beth Oprish. I work for the Pretrial Justice Institute, and along with some of my favorite people in the world, the RJJ staff. So we're about to begin our Reimagining Juvenile Justice 4.0 webinar. As we go through the webinar, we will be recording today's webinar. But if you have questions, there's a little chat box. You guys know Zoom by now, I'm sure. Down at the bottom, if you hover over, you'll see a chat box. So feel free to submit questions in there. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started because we want to be conscious and respectful of people's times. So welcome everybody to today's webinar. So we're ready to get going. So do we want to go to the next slide? We'll just kind of jump in. All right, beautiful. So again, welcome to today. How about those of you on the today's webinar, if you'll introduce yourself, let us know your role, organization, affiliation, something in the chat box. Okay, so far we got a shy crowd, right? We've got, now my little participant list said we've got people on this call, so please get unshy here and chat to us your name, your organization. Your microphones are muted because this is a webinar, and so toward the end we have times for questions and answers. So we can ask you to unmute yourself, or if you want to just submit your questions either throughout the webinar or at the end of the webinar in the chat box. We'll do our best to get to all the questions. If we don't get to all the questions, we have this vehicle called JDI Connect. We can always continue the conversation on JDI Connect. But feel free to submit questions in the chat box as we go through. And we're seeing some people that have clicked the unshy button and have submitted their names in the chat box. So I'll just say hello to a couple. Annie, one of my favorite people in South Dakota. There's Andrew, Kara. So welcome today. I won't spend the time to go through everybody, but we'll appreciate everybody's effort in putting your names in the chat box to let us know you're there. So if you do have questions, though, when you go to that chat box, there's that little arrow. So make sure you're asking the question to all the panelists, right? And maybe if you want to ask questions to everybody, because we're going to have some people on the line that have been through this and know stuff about RJJ, and questions are helpful for everyone. So click everybody when you're asking the questions. If you have something specific, if you put your name and give us an email or a way that we can communicate with you, if you want something specific, please feel free to do that. And as we said at the end of the presentation, there is time for questions. So we'll do our best to try to get those questions answered. This is going to be recorded. This will be available on JDI Connect in the RJJ page that talks about everything RJJ 4.0. So I will count on any of my colleagues from School of Maine and the RJJ team to let me know what I have missed and to fill in my gaps, thinking that I have done just a wonderful job. I'm willing to pass it off to, I think it's Greg who's up next. So again, welcome. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. Greg, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Beth. Hey, welcome everybody. This is Greg Welts from School in Maine Institute in Boston. Very glad that you've all joined us today. I'm going to just do a quick introduction of our SMI and Reimagining Juvenile Justice, which will probably be referred to quite a bit through this webinar as RJJ, just so everybody knows, RJJ, Reimagining Juvenile Justice, the same thing. Just give a quick wave from the rest of our SMI faculty and Annie Casey staff that supports this. We've got Kathy Flynn Woodland. We've got Naima Smith, who is actually moving the slides, and you see her picture there. We've got Willie Rodriguez, Sam Williams, Sonia Oken, and David Brown, who is with the Annie Casey Foundation, and we'll hear from David in just a few minutes. I wanted to take a few minutes at the top of the webinar to just acquaint you with what we hope to accomplish through this webinar today. And where better to start than with what our goals are for the day. And just to quick encapsulate the goals, we're going to walk you through the history of this work so you get a sense of where we came from, so you understand the context in which we've come from and where we're going. We're going to take a little bit of a dive into the curriculum and how it will be delivered during the Trainer of Trainer 4.0, so you get to learn about the modules. We're going to get firsthand reflections, and this is perhaps, one of the most exciting parts of this, from our 3.0 trainers for trainers who have all gone through this process and have just an amazing amount of experience and experiential learning, which is going to really help inform how we deliver our 4.0. So we'll get to hear from them. We're going to ask them a few questions, and they'll also be around to help us with our Q&A at the very end. We're going to give you a sense of how to get an application into the mix and what are the instructions. And then lastly, as I just indicated, we're going to give you time to ask questions to the faculty and advisory team. You've got the opportunity to put questions in the chat box throughout, so please do that. We will definitely pull from those at the latter part of our webinar today. So let's go forward then, and I'll just give you, this is the agenda then that will hopefully help us to address all the goals I just outlined. Again, ending with Q&As and next steps at the very end there. At this time, what I'd like to do is just introduce David Brown, Senior Fellow at the Annie Casey Foundation, who is part of the Youth Justice Group. David's been a longtime champion of the Reimagining Juvenile Justice, and this has been under his portfolio at the foundation for its entirety. We're grateful for David's support and his championing of the effort. David's somebody who I've known for almost 30 years. He and I have worked together, and he's definitely a committed and passionate person around really helping to bring about opportunities to support reform and change in the juvenile justice system and bring racial equity and justice. So let me give it to David to say hello, and then we'll get going.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, I just want to take a few minutes just to, say thank to all of you for joining us today. Really looking forward to this conversation. You get a chance to learn about the RJJ initiative and hopefully consider applying to be the next cohort. This project goes back, 6 years ago, and I guess Sonia and I were first kind of looking at existing curriculum that may exist that may lend themselves to being adapted for introducing youth development framework or to a juvenile justice audience, and came across the RJJ work and that we were actually funding in Massachusetts to get launched there, and thought that would be a great foundation for building this national curriculum. So we've really been, and I really appreciate the progress that's been made over that time, the evolution of this. I really appreciate the work of Willie and the SMI team around continuing to update and to improve and to evolve this curriculum. And also, I also want to thank all the folks who were on this call from the 3.0 cohort. I've really been impressed by the work they did around, once they were trained in this curriculum, their work to go back to their communities and train cohorts of folks on this curriculum, and then how much they've embraced this work and continued to be engaged in it even after they've completed their training and their cohorts and wanting to be part of the network across the country. So I want to really appreciate their being parts of this. And so I want to welcome you on behalf of the Casey Foundation, and hopefully many of you will decide to apply. So I'm going to hand it over to Willie, who's going to talk more about the history.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Greg. That was very nice. I have to say, I have to qualify this. I only have a few minutes to try to synthesize this, what I call the dream. And for me, it's a dream come to fruition, because with the support of the Casey Foundation and the SMI partnership, it was an idea that we thought about to help develop our system and to help with youth work professionals that could help our young people develop and thrive. And what becomes an idea now I'm super excited about the possibilities and the potential and the growth of this over the last 6 years. So now we're putting some teeth, and more exciting is that I can get to do this as briefly as possible and go through this, and I apologize for that. But because we have our 3.0 trainers, I'm very excited to see how they will be able to articulate more what this looks like in real time and real life when they start applying it. I want to start with this really quick quote. We can read it, but I just want to say something about Ed Dolan, Mass Commissioner of Probation, because he was very instrumental. He was the part of the leadership in Massachusetts that provided some seed development and some personnel, in particular from the probation department, to partake of our first demo, which was in Massachusetts, to launch the RJJ initiative. So I'm very grateful to Ed Dolan, but he's one of those leaders who is trying to integrate positive youth development and cross-systems approach within his own infrastructure, and working with both the commissioner of DYS, who was very much involved, and the head of the legal defense of the youth defense team down in Massachusetts, the youth defense department over at Mass Committee of Public Counsel. To conceive of this idea, again, we needed the kind of the demonstration place to do this. And part of this will be informing why we say the history, because to understand the genesis, then you understand that in order to implement, you got to have leadership support along the ways. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the module description. And when we started, if I could get the next slide on the conceptualization of this idea. We started again in Massachusetts, as everyone mentioned, in 2015, 2016. We convened a set of very key important stakeholders to get this going. Part of it was a group of leaders that would support this idea, and they thought it was good and that it was something that they wanted their entire workforce to learn. So in Massachusetts, we were more narrowly focused on about three different constituencies, which are in our juvenile justice system. And then as we evolved and we gave it, and the demonstration project became a success, we moved on to Pima County, Arizona, which was also a delivery that we gave, instead of the train-the-trainer, it was more of a straight-on delivery in the Arizona, Pima County. And we had more of a diverse constituent group there, which was very supportive. Again, the consistency between the two was that we had a lot of leadership support and a lot of on-the-ground support from the people who wanted to learn this curriculum and content. And as we evolved, as you can see, we went down then to what we have today, and with our 3.0 trainers, which was to train the trainer for replication purposes. It was to, if they felt that this content was very instrumental and they could move it within their units of training, their own auspices into the community, expand the base and roll it out to wherever they preferred. We decided that in order for this to become sustainable and to have a continued implementation and replication, we needed to train the trainers from different diverse units, as you can see by the T4T representation we had in our last training in Denver. So the history of concept, and we also had a design team that helped us configure many of the modules that in Massachusetts that we now have as part of our content curriculum, which is always fluid and dynamic and always expanding. Can I go to the next one? So if you have any questions, please, we're going to be answering a lot of these questions down the road with our sites and also with our Q&A session. So I just wanted to give you a sense of this. Again, I apologize for the quickness we developed these 6 modules. And again, it was based on us going out there and having the practitioners inform to us what were their basic needs within the module. So a lot of us, they said that they were wedded to positive youth development, but they needed to have intersectionalities, for example, of trauma-informed care, of racial and ethnic disparities, of leadership development, which was also a professional development model. And we construed this with that sort of background in order to construct a modules that were basically more of a, very general content, but could be applied then down the road in a way that people can use their creative license to expand on it, to continue to learn on it. So it's a tool, really, an instrument to start the jurisdictions off with the type of trainings they want their people to learn around positive youth development and cross-systems approach. The approach is PYD. However, PYD has a lot of intersectionalities with different areas of, like, for example, trauma-informed care, as I mentioned before, positive youth justice modals and things like that. And then we needed a cross-sector of partnerships that were very collaborative, everything from schools to police to the players within the child welfare and juvenile justice system that can work together and put this learning into putting the child at the center, so they can develop better relationships with those youth and work better in a positive direction, recognizing their assets and strengths. As you can see, there's a certain order to this, and that's done deliberately based on the input we got from the field. Now, when people implemented this, they also asked us questions whether they can move around the order of this. It's done intentionally, so the framework relies very much on the concepts of positive developments, belief systems. It's the elements that make positive development, like the 5 C's, the developmental assets, and then working together as teams and cross-sector units to address issues like race and ethnic equity and inclusion issues in policy and practice, engaging youth voice, empowering youth leadership, and positive family, it's that fostering positive family relationships. And then hopefully with all this learning, go to the 6th one, which is the very one that they meet up and interface again with their leadership and suggest and recommends ways of utilizing this curriculum and applying it to whether it's in-house policy or external policies that they need to address, or activate and advocate for several practitioner resources that young people need when they're doing this work. So it's sort of a bit of knowledge gathering that you do within this framework. Can I go to the next slide? Thank you. So these are, I'm not going to go through that in any in-depth way, but because you will see, and we will have available, our team will have available as you apply and you want to know more information, they'll answer all of this. But as you can see, each one of them have certain basic elements that need to be taught within these modules. So that's why, for example, learn the basic core concepts of PYD, examine the connections to Alice and brain development science, which is having an influence both in the legal sector and the policy sectors across the fields in today's world. Recognizing again the importance of the assets that these young people bring. It's not a deficit mindset, it's a positive youth development mindset. And exploring new ideas and strategies for integrating PYD principles. A lot of this curriculum relies on a lot of interaction with the participants, doing case analysis, doing having conversations, creating relationships, and then creating plans and solutions for the issues and the issues of youth they want to. Again, our emphasis on cross systems is very important. That we also have to understand that when you do PYD, it's not only recognizing the youth strengths and assets, it's also recognizing the teams and your cross partners that you're working with, that they have their strengths and assets. How can you use that to really maximize on efficiencies and effectiveness of the delivery or implementation of the work? Can I go to the next one? Again, this is central to our entire agenda right now, as you can see what's going on in the world. We had a module here. This is also an evolving module too, because you know of the nature of what's going on with our racial justice discussion going on in dialogue. So we're taking, right now as we work with the e-learning component, we are taking a really, really in-depth look and deep look as to how do we also transition and adapt and adjust this curriculum in ways that really address these issues, and we really have some honest conversations. I think this is across, it was always created with that lenses in mind. However, there's more emphasis now and more support, and as well as, you know, people are insisting that they want to address this from all spectrums. Next one, please. Engaging youth voice and empowering youth leadership. I think this is one of our core. We've brought on board, I want to say, my colleague Sam Williams, who will be helping us to develop this even further. Long time, has been a lot of experience with youth voice and youth leadership and empowering young people. I think this is one of the most critical pieces, because we do have to recognize that the youth are our assets, and they can be, when you give them the resources and opportunities, they can thrive. And when we talk about empowering models with youth leadership, we're talking about really having them at the table where they can make decisions with us, with the adults, to make decisions over the pathways that are going to create that, their opportunities as well. Next one, please. Again, fostering positive family relationships. These are all, again, have been identified as critical to this work and to the work of these professionals that have informed this curriculum. You got to have the wraparound. The family has to be a key player, like if they were part of that professional core. They are often invited into these things, but not necessarily engage in a very authentic and legitimate way, the way we ask them to engage the youth. So I think family is very critical, and this is a very important component. All of these modules and all of these things, you can't cover them. It's a longitudinal exercise in lifelong learning, but it's really important that we cover these themes and topics, and people can always add to the learnings later. And next one. And the last one is the critical component that I think is very empowering for the participants. One is because then they are able to translate, and each one of these modules, in part, if you'll see if people get selected and go deep into it, and I'll have our sites talk more about this, is, how do you roll this out after you've learned this? And what are the snippets of it that you can, even it's as small as, even some people have retinkered with their job descriptions, where they say, well, if I want to start hiring people, do I hire, professionals now with that mindset already? So maybe I may require PYD as an element of hiring in the future. And that's what I mean by transforming policy and practice. The other thing is in-house policies that still has to be changed in this system, that are more of surveillance minded, supervision minded, enforcement minded, and yes, less centered on the youth. And very simple, this PYD is youth driven, youth-led, and adult-guided. So that's one of the terms I use a lot in the teaching of this. But this is where the leadership plays a critical role, because our participants then come in with recommendations and solutions at the end here to how are they going to help not only reform systems, but also, really develop the practices and the applications, things that the belief system that, all professionals should work to develop better relationship with young people. And with that, I'm gonna, we'll put in a 1 minute spin.
And Naima, I don't think we're hearing the audio.
Yeah, this is our 3.0 crew. And so as you can see, it's a lot of interfacing, a lot of interaction. Amazingly, this curriculum is ways that, the professionals take over once they're there, the trainers, and they can adapt, adjust, and we are also there to guide them in this process, to help them, deliver what they want to do with their own jurisdictions when they go back. So I'm just excited. I got some of the sites here today to share in that experience. Thank you. And with that, I pass it on to
Greg.
Greg.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Willie. Thanks for walking us through the modules and giving a sense of what the core curriculum looks like. At this time, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the 7 advisory team trainers that are going to help support the next part of our agenda, which is to kind of ask them a few critical questions to help you give a sense of what they experienced and what difference it made. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick welcome. If you guys just want to go ahead and turn yourselves on, there we go. So we've got Sharifa Garvey from Massachusetts. She's the Mass State JDAI coordinator. Corey Shreve from Ohio. He's the Ohio JDAI coordinator. Aja Marie Ross, who is a youth participant from Ramsey County in Minnesota. And we've got Carla Douche, who is from Douglas County, Nebraska. We've got Lisa Reynolds from Baltimore, Maryland. Glenn Larson from Racine, Wisconsin. And then finally, Selena Engstead from Pinal County, Arizona. We've got a bunch of other folks from our 3.0 group who have joined, and we'll light them up and introduce them at the very end when we take our Q&A. I just want to say from the outset that I've enjoyed thoroughly getting to know all these folks throughout this past 6, 7, 8 months since we've been working together. And they're just volunteering to do this because they believe in what we're doing. At least that's the way I interpret it, and really want to share their experience and help the next cohort understand what it's about. And they will continue to be involved and help advise this project as we move it forward once we get our 4.0 cohort. So let me go ahead and start with a pretty simple and straightforward question. And Sharifa, I'm going to ask you to provide a first answer. So remember to take yourself off of mute. But the first question to the first four youth advisory team members, our think tank, is real simple. Why did you and your jurisdiction and your coalition get involved in RJJ?
Yes, so RJJ model was initially introduced to Massachusetts years ago. And so when it was introduced, of course, we were like, this is what we wanted to do. It was an opportunity that was a no-brainer. Many of our partners were already incorporating some of the practices highlighted in the RJJ curriculum, such as PYD, arresting racial and ethnic disparity, youth and family engagement. However, they were doing it in silos, and this was an opportunity to take a collaborative approach to bridge the gap of knowledge and understanding and how to reimagine the juvenile justice system in the practice of PYD, along with looking at every approach to develop a stronger model through a race equity lens. So this was a no-brainer. We really wanted to get our system stakeholders to speak the same language and to get on the same page when it comes to serving our children and families in our system. And so it was very successful in doing that and bridging that gap and having some cross collaboration and communication across teams.
Great, thank you, Sharifa. I'm going to turn to Corey, who's the JDI coordinator for the state of Ohio, and Corey actually brought 4 county representatives with him. So they had quite a presence at the 3.0, and they haven't disappointed us since. So Corey, same question to you. Why'd you guys get involved? Don't forget your mute.
Yeah, definitely don't forget that mute. Hi, everybody. Ohio has been doing many things around serving youth and families better. RJJ was an opportunity to move away from that compliance style of working with youth and families and really thinking about how we move from a referee to more of a coach. How do we support youth with strength-based approach to different things we're doing? One of the big projects we're doing throughout the state is probation transformation. And we really use this approach and these strategies to think about how we're working with kids. And it was a perfect structure to kind of go along with the Annie Casey Foundation's probation transformation. So what we really learned through this process is this gives us a framework to allow us to incorporate youth and family voice and to think about how we involve community in serving youth and families and bringing everybody together just to be a cross-system team to do this, that we can't do it alone. We can't do it as the justice system solely, but we need our community partners. And this strength-based approach is something that we're excited about. This is an approach we want to move throughout Ohio, not only just in our JDI sites, but also throughout the state.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn to Aja Marie, who actually has served as a national youth advisor to the JDAI at Annie Casey Foundation and was also part of the Ramsey County training cohort. And she's now joined us to be a youth advisor for the 4.0. From your perspective, Aja Marie, what was the reason for Ramsey County jumping in?
Well, so for me, I guess as a community member and a youth advocate, it looks a little bit different. So I kind of, in my involvement, I'm kind of brought back to my adolescence and my experience of being a teenager on probation. And I think about a time when I had my first violation, and instead of being sent to a facility, I was told I had to attend a girls group program every week. And I remember in attending this program, my former probation officer was alongside of another probation officer who also had our girls in this program. And they were kind of talking about my violation. And I just remember looking at this other probation officer, and she said to me, if you were on my caseload, you would have been in jail by now. And that stuck with me forever, because I think that if I was on her caseload, the outcome would have looked entirely different. And also it reminds me that there are two ways of doing things, two viewpoints in doing things for probation officers and people involved in systems. And gratefully, I had someone who decided to focus on my areas of growth versus trying to punish me. So that a story like that is something that is, for me, aligns with reimagining juvenile justice, because for me personally, I feel like I was lucky to have the former probation officer that I did, but I know that many youth aren't having those same opportunities or having those same probation officer or just people as support. So I think when reimagining juvenile justice, I'd like to say to have everyone to have a probation officer that mine was like. And as far as my involvement, being from alum of the Annie E. Casey Youth Council and being involved in my community, I was invited by Ramsey County's JDI coordinator to be a part of the training. So that was how my involvement in the training came about.
Powerful testimony. Thanks, Aja.
Thank you.
Last, let's ask Carla to respond to the same question. In Nebraska, why did you folks jump into this reimagining world?
Hey everyone, I'm Carla Dish with Operation Youth Success, and so I had a really unique opportunity being part of a backbone. Mark LaFleur with our youth center here in Omaha, Nebraska, had invited me to join him for the RJJ 3, and I was super excited. What really piqued my interest about RJJ was that this wasn't a training that we were going to provide a new service or a program to youth, right? Like it wasn't a place to be implemented. It was really to focus and work with stakeholders who have that shared vision, but to get to a common agenda of working together and do things differently for youth and families and juvenile justice. And being able to take that back and look through it through a different lens. Many my peers have mentioned, you know, the lens of strengths versus deficit, the racial and equity lens, truly partnering with youth and families, and through this process being able to know that it's not just that checking that box. And it's truly been, I think, an eye-opener and a life-changing experience, I think, for many folks here, because the conversations are different and engagement is different. So thank you.
Great, thanks. All right, we're going to turn now to our practitioners, continue with our practitioners, but we're going to ask a different question. Willie shared the modules with you and kind of the flow of how it works, and at the end of the day, we're looking for policy and practice change, things that you do differently as a result of this new mindset, and how professionals have gone through the process and have considered new ways of approaching youth justice. So let's turn to first Lisa Reynolds from Baltimore, to share what are some of the practices and changes that, whether it be practice or policies, that occurred as a result of the training that took place in Maryland.
Thanks, Greg. So I'm Lisa Reynolds. I work for the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services. I'm actually the executive director for pre-adjudication services, which is the front side of the shop. So the unique thing for us was that we were able to, while we trained Baltimore City on all 6 modules, we were able to take and apply the RJJ principles that we learned statewide. We already have a system reform unit, so we're lucky enough to look at all of our policies and our tools and our programming with that racial and ethnic lens. So in addition to doing that piece, what RJJ has afforded us is the opportunity to look at our forms, specifically the case connection form that guides a youth from pre-adjudication to adjudication, our pre-court closure forms, our court reports for all hearings, whether it's reviews, detention, VOPs, adjudication hearings, GPS or ATD hearings. What we did was we took those forms and kind of applied the modules that were for PYD to make sure we're including terminology, to make sure that they're strength centered up front, that we go in talking about the youth strengths, as opposed to just quickly reciting where the deficits are, that we incorporate a youth and family voice. So our forms now allow for a family and a youth to weigh in. What are their needs? What are their ongoing needs? What wasn't addressed? And kind of, give us a critique of what they felt that they need to do to continue to be, positive contributing members of the community. In addition, we have added that through our QA process, youth and family services, so that we can gather their voice and experience that way. Through the pandemic, we've done a lot of reviews of detention, kids in placement and per diems, and we have really revamped in how we're communicating to our stakeholders, to the court, to the program providers, to each other, how we refer to the case at hand and how we speak about the children that we're working with. It's an excellent opportunity for us to really rethink that a youth isn't something that we're carrying as a case throughout the system, but as a person who has needs, who definitely has strengths, and how we can foster those. So it's been an excellent opportunity for us here in Maryland, and something that's been well received and accepted, and we hope to continue.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Let's turn to Glenn Larson, Racine County Youth Probation, Wisconsin.
Hi everyone. I am Glenn Larson. I'm the Youth Justice Supervisor in Racine, Wisconsin, and becoming involved in positive youth development was it really complemented a lot of things that we were already doing. So one of the specific examples of how we applied this was telling the story of the youth to the court, and really looking at what our social history and what we reported to the court and the specific language that was being used. So some examples of that would be the youth admitted to using drugs or admitted to doing things. So it kind of made it look like we were interrogating them to get them to admit to things, instead of saying, could you share some information with me or share this story with me. So really moving away from that compliance base to building a relationship with that youth. So we talked with youth and families both, talked to them about what their experience was in court, how they felt about how their story was shown in court, and then they gave us different examples of how we should ask different questions and look at different things. So for example, if you look at the school part of a social history, it'll mainly talk about the behavior issues that particular youth has. Are they getting special education services? Has their schedule been reduced? It didn't say anything about how does the youth feel when they walk into school on a daily basis? Who do they have relationships with? Tell me what your favorite class is. Tell me what your favorite day at school was. Who are their support? So it's really taking that and showing that, giving a different story than as if you were just going to talk about compliance-based things, then the court looks at and says, you have to attend school every single day and with no unexcused absences and be perfect and behave just fine, where we're trying to, say, we would like them to develop relationships. These are the subjects that they like, and really look at, school as an experience than more of a compliance-based thing. So we are currently developing more things like that and doing that and putting that in and getting that really youth voice and telling that youth story and that family story in a much different way when they're first going through the court process.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you to all of the 3.0 trainers, our advisory think tank members. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Flynn Woodland now from SMI, School and Main Institute, to get into more of the details related to the 4.0. Kathy, all yours.
Okay, hi everybody. Now, if you want to bring that back up again, we'll start with the absolutely unbelievable that it was a little over 15 months ago that we first met all of you. We had 34 trainers from 15 sites that participated with us in the first RJJ Training for Trainers Institute. We called it the T4T, and it happened back in Denver, Colorado. It was face-to-face. And from those 15 sites and 34 trainers, they in turn trained over 450 individuals in the youth justice field around the country. So we're very excited, and it's just thrilling to hear some of the impact that you just talked about. And we've got a lot more voices from the field. Hopefully we can hear from a few more at the end. But this year, because of the pandemic, we're going virtual. So this fall, starting in September, and we'll run through the calendar real briefly on that to give you some of the key dates. We're going to set up our virtual institute, and we're going to do it over a number of different days. So we're breaking it up a little bit. But again, it's still looking at the content that Willie walked us through in terms of the curriculum. But it's also going to talk a lot about the process and about the instructional strategies that would be most effective in multiple ways, because we're thinking that as we move in the future, near future, we're going to have face-to-face opportunities for training once again. So Naima, let's go to the next calendar here. Just want to run through real quickly what this institute is really going to look like, and I'll give you some key dates and a little bit of background on this as we move forward. The application process is underway. There's a website that you can go to and an application link. Those applications are due on the 15th of September. We're going to have a 2-week turnaround time frame to get our finalists selected by September 30th. This year, we're looking for, or I should say in the 4.0 Training Institute, we're looking to select up to 20 sites and up to 60 trainers. So each site would have and probably individually with each of the trainer sites that are there. And then we're going to look through our fundamentals through JDAI and the RJJ. One of the things that, and I think Corey mentioned this when he spoke, that there are many different initiatives that are going on around the country when it comes to the justice system, the youth justice system. And so one of the things we want to do is introduce folks that may not have had a chance to go into the detention alternatives initiatives that are out there, such as the Deep End Initiative, probation, transformation, family engaged case planning, and a little bit of what those fundamentals are and how RJJ fits into that. The other is then working through this calendar, thinking about the why and hearing from a few more voices from the field. So as we get some of the questions that come in, you'll be able to tap into our advisory team. You'll be able to tap into some of the trainers that have trained over the past year, as well as the national faculty. We're also going to spend some time, and I think Lily talked about it quite well, about the leadership engagement up front and the importance of that, and the role that they play also in doing the outreach and engagement for a cross sector. This again is a part and parcel of a curriculum that was developed, as Willie mentioned, back in Massachusetts. And I think what we've heard from all our trainers is how important that leadership is. So we're going to talk about strategies and experiences from our 3.0 trainers on how they approach this work. When we continue into this, we're going to introduce you to our online RJJ group. And this is on JDAI Connect, and it provides an opportunity to have all the materials, all the curriculum, all the module, like the resources, annotated agendas, examples of PowerPoints, examples of resources that have been used in the delivery of the curriculum. So you're going to see some of that throughout kind of our guidance of you through that process. We're also going to be looking at the more in-depth, as Willie talked about, those different modules. We'll spend about a 2.5-hour session throughout the month of November to go into that. It'll be very interactive. We'll show different types of strategies and breakout groups. Some of the local implementation that'll come at the end of this is really going to take a look at training teams, having again that 25 to maybe 30 cross-sector group of participants. Course delivery would happen for you between January and September of 2021. And again, that could be in multiple ways. It could be done as totally virtually. It could be done in a blended approach, or it could be done fully face-to-face, depending on where we're at. The logistics, those are determined locally with the help of a coach. You'll see coaching up here. Trainers are provided with support and technical assistance from us and from the pool of our advisory group that's out there to provide you with the kind of guidance to develop an implementation plan. So all of that is to say, this is going to be an interesting approach for us this year, doing it all virtually, but you'll have a lot of supports along the way, a lot of access to our online work. And speaking of our work, I'm going to turn it over to Naeem to talk to us very briefly about the online supports that we have underway, both this RJJ group online and some coursework that we're developing. Take it away, Naeem.
So I'll jump in. This is Greg. As you can see, we've got two different opportunities that will be online presence for expanding our work with the Reimagining Juvenile Justice. We're in the process of developing an asynchronous curriculum that will mirror the modules that Willie shared with you. And this will also be something that we'll be able to incorporate into your local training. We are now in the process of going through each of the modules and taking the materials and curriculum and building a self-paced curriculum that an individual could sign on to, or as I said, it could also be used as a companion to create a blended learning approach for our train the trainer and the local training once it goes back to your communities. And then secondly, we've created a central online location for all of the resources. It's a landing page. Some of it will be public facing, but you'll also have access to a specific RJJ group that'll be only for the trainers. It'll have all of the curriculum materials that we continue to work on, and it will also have opportunities for you to connect and network with other trainers throughout the training process. So we can go ahead.
Greg, I'm sorry, I was muted. I just couldn't get that mute going. But I just want to add, we just recently updated the RJJ space on JDI Connect. And like Greg said, that's a place where everybody will come together and interact and hopefully can keep communications going. We will be trying to do our best and keep it lively so you have a community of peers to continue learning opportunities and dive deep into this work.
Okay, let's go ahead and advance it, and we'll get into some more of the details related to the application. So we've definitely want JDAI sites interested to have applications put in, but we're also looking for other kinds of coalitions. So you could be a community-based organization working with community partners in your youth justice. One of the things that we want to make sure is that in each of the coalitions that applies, that juvenile probation is a member of that core group and has leadership representation and participants as part of your local training cohort. And it's really important to have a cross-section of agencies. We've listed a few here: community and faith-based organizations, who could also be a lead organization working with the public organization, youth and family program, courts, public education. Glenn mentioned that earlier, how important public education is in school districts, local law enforcement, parents and family members, really representing that voice, system-involved youth, and others are encouraged to participate. You know, we leave it to you to come up with what the most important cross-section of partners is in order to really do this work, not just within your own organizational silo, but to do it as a collaboration across all. You go ahead and move it forward. So there is an application. You can see there's a surveymonkey.com RJJ application link to that. It can be found on the JDA website. we think that the application isn't an onerous one. It's relatively simple and short. We ask a few key, very important questions. And if you go ahead and move to the slide to the next one. One of the really important things is that one of the learnings is that we want to make sure that there's clear commitment to this work coming into it. That's something that we learned in 3.0. And so as you complete the application, the applicant is going to be asked to sign off and agree to certain things. And you can see a list of those things, which is taken right out of the application. The first is under the category of leadership commitment, really promoting and supporting system change and fostering positive youth development. So there's got to be leadership support for the core tenet of what RJJ is about, and that's the positive youth development. We're looking for a leadership structure that is collaborative, that crosses those various organizations that make up your cross-system partnership, and that, as Module 6 leads to the opportunity for innovative policy and practice recommendations and changes to arise, that this isn't just an exercise to develop the professional and understanding of positive youth development, but we want that to lead further to changes at the jurisdictional level, at the local level, and how you do policy and practice to really support positive youth development in your coalition or jurisdiction. And then lastly, training investment. Just to be clear that we have anticipated that it'll be about 20 hours of facilitated training, that we want a clear commitment that each member of the training team will be part of that, that either 2 or 3, 3 is optimal. We've learned that having 2 trainers often can be a challenge when some work of one of those 2 trainers takes them off for some reason, or you have people who leave the organization. And then that you would commit to all of the training and the webinars, and then we also will provide 3 months of coaching at the end of the training, and that will help support local implementation of your training back in your jurisdiction or with your coalition. And that you'll be able to then deliver between January and September, 9 months. The 3.0 folks squeezed it into 6 months, and we learned that more time was necessary. So you'll have 9 months to deliver from January to September, basically the entire RJJ course module curriculum. And that each applicant will identify those 2 or optimally 3 trainers through some kind of a process to name those trainers who are qualified, have content knowledge, but are also great with adult learning. So that's a little bit about the are you ready? And these are some of the key areas that we would hope that you would be ready in if you're going to apply. I want to double back. We're going to now jump into our Q&A session. And before we take open Q&As, I want to go back and ask Selena Angstead from Pinal County to respond to the question that I had asked earlier regarding what are some of the policy and practices, and want to finish this way to get some really strong policy and practices to give you a sense of what's possible with RJJ. So Selena, all yours.
Thank you, Greg. We had reviewed our department policies, our procedures, and our practices to ensure that they supported and aligned with positive youth development. So that really meant looking at all of the established policies and procedures and make sure that they had an opportunity to look at things from a strength-based approach for youth. We worked to improve those policies, programs by incorporating recommended changes that had come from the feedback that we had in our RJJ group, because we work throughout the training to get feedback from participants as well as the last session. And then some of the recommended changes is having youth and family surveys at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of supervision to make sure that we were doing a good job and maintaining fidelity to the model for the families and the youth that we serve. We also recognize the fact that parents are the experts regarding their children, and they should be involved in every step of the process. I know that seems like a no-brainer, but we weren't including that before. We weren't always including parents in the case planning, in meetings, court hearings, and probation shouldn't happen to them. They should be true partners and be change agents in their children's lives and not just have the probation officers driving that work. We work to create a forum and develop and encourage family and youth voice throughout the establishment and creation of youth and family advisory councils. And then lastly, we work to review our hiring practices and reflect PYD values and work to hire new employees who express a PYD mindset. So just really retooling some of the questions that we're asking candidates who want to work for our department to ensure that they have that PYD framework. And then our new employee orientation includes concepts of PYD and the roles of juvenile justice system partners. We learned from our RJJ training that oftentimes juvenile court staff don't know the roles of the other partner agencies. So we make sure to do that when we're onboarding new staff as well.
Greg, you're muted.
Thanks, Selena. Very, very system-focused policy and practice changes. Great way to end with that. I want to now bring on the other trainers. So if the previous group of trainers who have already responded to questions, and then let me bring on the other trainers who have joined us from our 3.0 Youth Advisory Team. And I'll just quickly introduce those, and then we'll start looking at the questions that we have. We've got Miracle Teo. Miracle is another one of our Youth Advisory Team members from California. Andrew. Is Andrew on here? Not sure Andrew made it today. Jenny Perella from Mass, and Annie Brokenleg from South Dakota. See Annie. Hi, Annie. Josh Campbell from Louisiana, and Shuba. Got her when she was taking a drink. Hi, Shuba. Okay. All right. So let's look at our chat box and see if we have any questions.
Greg, there's one for Becky Edwards. Is it a requirement that an applicant be a JDAI court?
It is not a requirement that the applicant be a JDAI court. It could be a JDAI site. It could be a court. What we're looking for is an organization, whether it be public, private, nonprofit, to take the lead and form that coalition that we were talking about, which is partners that cross the youth justice continuum, both community and system partners.
I also added in the comment area that one of the questions we always come up with is what's these cross sectors and key players. And I really want people that when you select the partners in it, that they really are invested in, you know, putting the child at the forefront of their work, and that they, if you really think of a child developmentally, what do they need in terms of opportunities and resources? And that defines somewhat your cross-sector partners. You know, when we look at JDAI and juvenile detention and everything, that's sort of the last piece, right? So you really need to, this RJJ was also crafted to work with schools and police, and some of the sites have struggled with trying to get those partnerships in, but it's very central because those individuals make decisions that could be detrimental for those young people. So you want to get those partners around that are going to make your job harder down the road, but are very important because they're the frontline people who make sometimes a decision to put them in that detrimental pathway, and positive development is about putting them in positive pathways. So if you think about it that way, then you start defining who are the key players you should have there. Not everybody's going to be in it, but you might find players that are very central to this process of helping this youth thrive.
There's another question in the chat box regarding if certain finalists are not selected or ready by September 30th, when is the next RJJ selection training available? We don't have a specific date at this time, but our hope would be, depending on continued support from the foundation, from the Annie Casey Foundation, and a next iteration of this, that we would do this sometime in 2021 if it were to happen. But there's nothing official and nothing confirmed at this time.
I also want to add, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong for my colleagues here, that I think sometimes it's very difficult to try to get the partnerships to agree all at once when you're applying, because that takes time. And when you define it, it takes time to nurture. But if you, at the time of application, if you don't have all the commitments, but you get verbal commitments from those partners, that eventually, I think that would still not disqualify you. You know, it's the fact that if you have cross-sector, your application matters because we only see it as a sort of a snapshot, and then we interview and probe a little further. But I think it's important for people to understand the elements of the criteria that Greg articulated, because it's important that at least you're working towards it. So I don't want to feel that just because you don't have the partners ready to go in day one when you apply, that it's based on what you're conceptualizing here to be and what you think you can achieve down the road as you get those key players around the table. Anybody want to add on that? I would.
I just wanted to give our practitioners the last word here. I want to remind folks to make sure that they go to the JDAI website at the Annie Casey Foundation, and that's where you'll find the application and all the information. But I'm going to ask Annie and Shuba to close us out today with any last comments that you want to make, advice or anything from prospective applicants. Annie, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I think I would just add that when you're doing this curriculum, that you spend time in each of the modules talking about the last module, which is transforming policy and practice. You know, I think looking back on our first cohort that we did statewide, I wish we would have done that more, because when it came to the last module and we're like, okay, it's transforming policy and practice. Now, what are you going to change? It was a little hard for folks to kind of come up with stuff. So had we been more intentional about kind of setting that up, I think that it would have been, which we still got some really great action steps from folks, but I think that is like the key thing, and I've heard it throughout this webinar, that the point of this, right, is obviously to provide a really educational, enriching experience for people, but really to be able to then transform your system in some way. So that would just be my advice. And I took that, and we just had a 2-day training in one of our sites here in South Dakota. And I tried to kind of like throw that in throughout the 2 days. It's like, hey, this would be a really good idea to change. Like it kind of became a joke, right? Like another idea for an action step. So that would be my advice, to just always be intentional in thinking about that last module.
And we'll be able to continue to get that kind of advice from our advisory team, having gone through all this experience. Shuba, you got 10 seconds. Can you give us something valuable in 10 seconds?
Yeah, I would say definitely apply, because I think it's totally worth doing. The highlight, I would say, is that, you know, we always hear the phrase thinking outside the box. RJJ gives you an opportunity to toss the box out and figure out a better way to do things.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, folks who have joined us today. Thank you, our advisory team. Thank you, School in Maine. Thank you, Annie Casey Foundation. Again, this will be recorded and available for you to download and review later on. Don't forget, the applications are due on the 15th, and hopefully we'll get back to you by the end of the month in September. Take care.